Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Roy Beckett stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner when Callie breezed in, tossing her purse onto the table. She kicked off her shoes and headed straight for the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of white wine. "Mom's having a small dinner thing this weekend," she said, not looking at him as she poured herself a glass. "Saturday at 7. Roy's knife paused mid-chop. This weekend, he kept his voice neutral, though a familiar tension crept into his shoulders. "What's the occasion?" Callie shrugged, taking a sip. "Just a get-together. Nothing fancy." Roy resumed chopping, the steady rhythm of the knife against the cutting board filling the silence between them. 5 years of marriage had taught him to recognize the subtle undercurrents in her voice. Something wasn't right. "Should I bring anything?" he asked. "Just yourself." Callie's phone buzzed. She grabbed it quickly, her face illuminated by the screen. A small smile played at her lips as she typed a response. Roy watched her from the corner of his eye, noting how her body language shifted, shoulders relaxing, posture opening. She never looked that way when texting him. "I'll be there," he said finally. 7 on Saturday. Callie glanced up, appearing almost surprised, as if she'd forgotten he was there. "Sure. Whatever." She picked up her wine and disappeared into the living room, leaving Roy alone with the half-chopped vegetables. He sighed, setting down the knife. 5 years of trying to fit in with the Maynard family, 5 years of subtle slights, condescending smiles, and conversations that stopped when he entered the room. Loretta had made it clear from the beginning that a former high school teacher turned corporate software trainer wasn't what she'd envisioned for her daughter. But for Callie's sake, he kept trying. The refrigerator hummed in the background as Roy stared at the cutting board. He'd go to the dinner. He'd smile and make conversation. He'd be the better person, as always. What other choice did he have? Saturday evening arrived with a light drizzle typical of Oregon Springs. Roy's training session had run late, forcing him to rush home to shower and change. By the time he pulled into Loretta's driveway, it was 20 minutes past 7. He sat in the car for a moment, steeling himself. Loretta's house, a sprawling ranch-style home in an upscale neighborhood, was lit up like Christmas. Cars lined both sides of the street. Roy frowned. For a small dinner thing, there seemed to be an awful lot of vehicles. The muffled sound of music and laughter drifted from the backyard. Roy walked around the side of the house, following a stone path illuminated by solar lights. As he rounded the corner, he stopped short. The backyard had been transformed. White string lights hung from tree to tree, creating a canopy of soft light. Round tables covered in cream-colored linen dotted the lawn, each adorned with flower centerpieces. A bar had been set up near the patio, where a bartender in a black vest served drinks to a line of guests. Near the back fence, a catering team worked behind long tables laden with food. This was no small dinner. This was an event. At least 30 people mingled across the lawn, dressed in cocktail attire, wine glasses in hand. Roy scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from previous family gatherings. Callie's cousins, her aunt and uncle, neighbors, friend from her dental practice. His gaze moved from table to table, looking for his place setting. Nothing that a server passed with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, avoiding eye contact. Roy stood motionless, suddenly aware of his slightly wrinkled button-down and khaki pants, acceptable for a casual dinner, but underdressed for whatever this was. He spotted Callie near the bar, laughing with a tall, well-built man he recognized as Graham, her ex-boyfriend. She wore a navy blue dress he'd never seen before, her hair styled in an elegant updo. She looked beautiful and completely at ease in a gathering he knew nothing about. If sensing his presence, she glanced over. Their eyes met across the yard. For a brief moment, something like guilt crossed her face. Then it vanished, replaced by a cool smile as she whispered something to Graham and made her way toward Roy. "You made it," she said, voice light. A wine glass dangled from her fingers, half empty. "What is this?" Roy asked quietly, gesturing to the elaborately decorated space. "Mom decided to expand a bit. You know how she gets." Roy looked around again. "There's no place for me." Callie's smile didn't falter. "Didn't think you'd actually show up. You're always so busy with work." She took a sip of wine. Besides, it's mostly family, and you never really enjoy these things anyway. Family. The word hung between them. 5 years, and he was still not family. Around them, he noticed glances, some curious, others embarrassed. A few guests quickly looked away when he caught their eye. They knew. Everyone knew he hadn't been included. Your mother planned this for weeks, Roy said. It wasn't a question. Callie shrugged. What does it matter? You're here now. Grab a drink if you want. Roy looked at his wife, really looked at her. The woman he'd fallen in love with, who once told him his quiet strength made her feel safe. Now she stood before him, unconcerned that he'd been deliberately excluded. Unbothered by his humiliation, he looked past her to where Loretta stood with a group of women, her gaze flickering occasionally toward him. There was no mistaking the satisfaction in her eyes. Without a word, Roy turned and walked back down the stone path. Behind him, he heard Callie call out once, half-heartedly. Before the sound of her laughter rejoined the party, he drove home in silence. The radio off, the only sound the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers against the light rain. The phone rang at 8:17 the next morning. Roy had been awake for hours, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold. Callie hadn't come home. He looked at the caller ID. Loretta. His hand hovered over the phone for 3 rings before he finally answered. Hello. Well, that was quite the display last night. Loretta's voice was crisp, each word precisely enunciated. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was to explain your little tantrum to everyone? Roy said nothing. Are you there? Hello. Loretta huffed. Anyway, the bill came out to $2,500. And since you left without helping or contributing, you can at least pay. That's the least you could do. The silence stretched between them. Did you hear me? The catering alone was. Put Callie on, Roy said finally, his voice flat at a pause, then rustling sounds as the phone changed hands. Hey, Callie's voice was subdued, lacking its usual edge. You spent the night there. I had too much to drink. Thought it was safer. Roy closed his eyes. Your mother wants me to pay for the party. Well, yeah. Callie's voice regained some of its confidence. It was expensive, and you know Mom's on a fixed income. I told her you would. It's the right thing to do. The right thing to do. 5 years of doing the right thing. 5 years of tolerating snide comments about his career, his clothes, his background. 5 years of watching Callie slowly transform into her mother's daughter rather than his wife. Roy, are you going to do it or not? Something inside him, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. Not with a dramatic break, but with a quiet, clean release. No. What do you mean, no? Goodbye, Callie. Roy hung up the phone. He sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Then, deliberately, he reached for his laptop and opened it. When Callie returned home 3 hours later, Roy had cleared his home office and was methodically boxing up his books. What are you doing? She demanded, standing in the doorway. What does it look like? Roy continued placing books in the box, not looking up. Is this about last night? God, you're so sensitive. It wasn't personal. Roy paused, a hardcover in his hand. Not personal? 30 people at a dinner party, and the only one without a seat is your husband. He resumed packing. If that's not personal, I don't know what is. Mom just forgot. Stop lying. His voice remained calm, but carried an edge Callie had never heard before. I'm done, Callie. I'm done being the punchline to your family's jokes. I'm done being disrespected. Callie stared at him, her mouth opened slightly. You're overreacting. It was one dinner. It was never just one dinner. Roy sealed the box with packing tape. I'll have the rest of my things out by Friday. You can't be serious. Callie's voice rose. You're leaving me over a stupid party? Roy finally looked at her, his gaze steady. No, I'm leaving because I finally see you clearly. And I deserve better. He picked up the box and walked past her, out of the room they had shared for 5 years. As he loaded it in his car, he felt something unexpected. Not anger or grief, but a profound sense of clarity that no more. He had been humiliated for the last time. The bell above the door chimed as Roy entered Lakeside Coffee. The familiar scent of roasted beans and baked goods wrapped around him like a blanket. Behind the counter, his sister Avery looked up from the espresso machine, her eyebrows rising at the sight of him. Well, this is a surprise. Thought you'd be enjoying suburban bliss at the McMansion. She wiped her hands on her apron. What brings you to my humble establishment at 10 on a Monday? Roy set his laptop bag on a stool. I need a place to crash for a while. Avery's teasing smile faded. She studied his face, then nodded to an employee. Jake, cover for me. She untied her apron and hung it on a hook. Come on, we'll talk upstairs. Her apartment above the coffee shop was small, but tidy, a stark contrast to Loretta's meticulous showplace. Roy sat at the kitchen table while Avery made them each a cup of coffee. So, she said, sliding a mug toward him. What happened? Roy told her everything: the dinner party, the empty chair, the phone call demanding payment. As he spoke, Avery's expression hardened. I always knew that woman was poison, she said when he finished. And Callie. God, Roy, I try to warn you. I know. Roy stared into his coffee. I thought I could make it work. That if I just tried hard enough, that's always been your problem. Avery reached across the table and tapped his arm. All that patience and understanding. You spent 5 years being their doormat. I thought I was being a good husband. There's a difference between being supportive and being a pushover. She leaned forward. You've got more spine than any of them. It's time you showed it. Roy looked up. What do you mean? I mean, stop being passive. You try the nice guy approach. Where has it gotten you? Sleeping on your sister's couch at 38. She took a sip of coffee. They humiliated you, Roy. They've been doing it for years. Maybe it's time they learn actions have consequences. Roy was quiet for a long moment. I'm filing for divorce. Good. But is that enough? What are you suggesting? Revenge. Avery shrugged. I prefer to think of it as justice. They've been playing games with you for years. Maybe it's time you played a few of your own. Roy thought about Loretta's smug face at the party, about Callie's dismissive shrug when he pointed out there was no place for him, about 5 years of trying to earn acceptance from people who had decided, from the beginning, that he wasn't good enough. I need to be smart about this, he said finally. I need information. Avery smiled. Now you're talking. Where do we start? Over the next weeks, Roy moved with purpose. He returned to the house when Callie was at work, gathering important documents and personal possessions. He found a small apartment close to Avery's coffee shop and arranged for mail forwarding. He consulted a divorce attorney who advised him to document everything and maintain financial records. Most importantly, he began to observe. Instead of avoiding family gatherings as he had in the past, he attended them not as a participant, but as a watcher. He noted how Callie grew animated around Graham, how Loretta whispered to her friends when he was nearby, how the family closed ranks against outsiders. A Sunday barbecue at Callie's cousin's house. Roy sat quietly on the deck, nursing a beer as family members moved around him like water around stone. Surprised to see you here, said a voice beside him. Darla, Loretta's cousin, phone in hand as always. Thought you and Callie were on the outs. We're working through some things, Roy replied, the practiced response rolling off his tongue. Darla nodded, clearly disappointed at the lack of drama. Well, good for you. Family's important, you know. The Maynards stick together. She glanced at her phone. Oh, look at this photo from Loretta's party. Wasn't it gorgeous? She spent months planning it. She turned the screen toward Roy. There was the backyard transformed, Loretta standing proudly in the center of a group photo. The timestamp showed a date 3 weeks before the actual event. Months of planning. Roy asked casually. Oh yes. She was so excited about it. Even had special place cards made. Darla swiped to another photo. See? Calligraphy and everything. Roy studied the image of the elegantly set tables, each with a delicate place card. Evidence of deliberate exclusion. Beautiful, he said. Would you mind sending me these photos? I'd love to have them. Sure thing. Darla beamed, happy to share. About hundreds. I post everything online. I'll tag you. Roy smiled. That will be perfect. One rainy afternoon, Roy sat in his apartment, scrolling through the treasure trove of photos Darla had sent. The woman documented everything, every party, every family dinner, every casual get-together. In them, Roy traced the pattern of his own gradual exclusion over the years. But more importantly, he found other patterns that, in photo after photo, Callie and Graham appear together, sometimes in the background, sometimes front and center. Their body language told a story. The casual touches, the leaning in, the private smiles. Nothing definitive, but suspicious, Roy set aside his laptop and paced the small living room. He didn't want to be right about this. Despite everything, the idea of Callie cheating hurt in a way he hadn't expected. His phone buzzed. A text from Avery. You need to come to the shop. Now, 20 minutes later, Roy sat in Avery's office behind the coffee shop, staring at a statement she'd pushed across the desk. Where did you get this? He asked. Remember Jake? My barista? His brother works at First National. When I mentioned your situation, he got curious. Avery tapped the paper. Loretta took out a $10,000 personal loan 3 months ago. Used Callie's identity to do it. Roy studied the document. Does Callie know? According to Jake's brother, the statements go to Loretta's address, not yours. My guess. Callie co-signed. Then Loretta told her not to tell you. Roy folded the statement carefully. That party cost $2,500. Where's the rest of the money? Avery shrugged. That's the $10,000 question, isn't it? Back at his apartment, Roy made a decision. He'd avoided checking Callie's messages out of some lingering sense of respect. Now, that respect felt misplaced. Their shared cloud account contained backups of both their phones. Roy had set it up years ago, and Callie had never bothered to change the password. Within minutes, he was scrolling through her text history. The messages between her and Graham went back months. G. Miss you already. When can I see you again? C. Not sure. He's been clingy lately. Maybe next week when he has that conference? G. Your mom thinks you should just tell him. C. Not yet. Need to figure some things out first. Soon though. G. I've waited this long. What, a few more weeks? Message after message confirmed what Roy had suspected. No explicit mentions of physical intimacy, but the emotional betrayal was clear. They were making plans that involved Loretta, plans that didn't include him. He took screenshots, backed everything up, then closed the laptop. The rain tapped against the windows as Roy sat in the growing darkness of his apartment. The hurt was there, but duller now, overshadowed by a cold, clear purpose. They had made a fool of him for the last time. You're absolutely sure about this? The lawyer Michael Bennett, a college friend Roy had reconnected with, peered at him over reading glasses. Once we file, there's no going back. Roy nodded. I'm sure. The evidence you've gathered, the loan, the text messages, it gives us leverage, but it's not a guarantee. Oregon's a no-fault state. I understand. Michael removed his glasses. And the other things you mentioned, contacting Graham's fiancée, the HOA complaint. I can't advise you on those. That's not legal counsel. I'm not asking for legal counsel on those matters. Roy's voice was calm. Just the divorce. All right then. Michael gathered the papers. I'll file these tomorrow. Callie should be served by the end of the week. 3 days later, Roy stood outside a small gym in North Portland. Through the window, he could see Graham working with a client, all smiles and encouragement. According to Darla's social media, Graham had recently proposed to a woman named Elise, a pediatric nurse he'd met at a charity event. Roy waited until the session ended and Graham's client left. Then he entered the gym. Graham looked up from the reception desk, his smile faltering when he recognized Roy. Hey man, can I help you with something? Yes. Roy approached the desk. You can help me understand why you've been texting my wife behind my back for the past 6 months. The color drained from Graham's face. Listen, I don't know what you think. I don't think anything. I know. Roy placed a folder on the counter. Here are the messages. All of them. Interesting reading. Graham swallowed. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like an emotional affair at minimum. It looks like you and Callie and Loretta have been plotting something. Roy pushed the folder toward Graham. This is a copy. I thought you should have one. Why are you giving this to me? Because tomorrow, I'm sending another copy to Elise. Roy held up his hand as Graham started to protest. Unless you end whatever this is with Callie. Completely. No contact. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Roy turned to leave, then paused. I've spent 5 years being the nice guy, the bigger person. Those days are over. As Roy walked out of the gym, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Elise. Graham just told me everything. Thank you. One piece in place. The next day, Roy drove to Loretta's neighborhood and parked outside a modest house with an HOA president sign in the yard. The door was answered by an older man with a military haircut and a suspicious frown. "Mr. Rivera? My name is Roy Beckett. I have some information about a violation of the community guidelines that I think you should see." 20 minutes later, he left the house with a handshake and a promise that the matter would be addressed at the next board meeting. According to Mr. Rivera, using residential property for commercial events without permits was taken very seriously by the Homeowners Association. Second piece in place, that on his way home, Roy's phone rang. "Callie, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded without preamble. "You'll have to be more specific." "The divorce papers." "Roy? Really? You couldn't even talk to me first? Like you talked to me before excluding me from a party you and your mother spent months planning. God, you're still on that? It was one stupid dinner. And the loan? And Graham? Were those one stupid things too?" Silence. Then, in a smaller voice, "What do you know about Graham?" "Everything, Callie. I know everything." Roy pulled into a parking space and turned off the engine. "The divorce is happening. You can make it easy or difficult. Your choice." A long pause. "Mom says you talked to the HOA president." "Yes. Why are you doing this?" Roy closed his eyes. "Because for 5 years, I've let you and your family treat me like I don't matter. Like I should be grateful for the scraps of respect you occasionally throw my way. I'm done with that. So this is revenge. No, this is consequences." He opened his eyes. "One more thing. I'm hosting a dinner next Saturday, 7 o'clock. I'd like you and your family to be there. You can't be serious." "I am." "Consider it a farewell gesture." A bitter laugh. "After all this, you expect us to come to a dinner party? If you don't, the next copies of those text messages go to your boss and your father. I wonder what Dr. Prescott would think about his hygienist discussing patients in such colorful terms." The threat hung in the air between them. "Fine," Callie said finally. "We'll be there." "Wonderful. It's a formal occasion. Dress accordingly." Roy ended the call and sat in his car, watching raindrops trace patterns on the windshield. The old Roy, the one who had stood silent in Loretta's backyard, would never have made such threats. But that Roy was gone. In his place was a man who understood, finally, that some people only respected power. The private dining room at Riverside Gardens glowed with soft light. White tablecloths covered round tables, arranged in a semicircle facing a small projector screen. Each place setting featured elegant china, crystal glasses, and a small, handwritten place card. Roy adjusted his tie, surveying the room one last time. Everything was perfect. "They're here," Avery said from the doorway. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. "Ready for this?" Roy nodded. "More than ready." Loretta entered first, chin high, dressed in an expensive navy suit that screamed old money she didn't have. Callie followed, wearing a red dress Roy had once complimented. Behind them came various family members: Darla, her husband, Callie's cousins, and, surprisingly, Graham. "Welcome," Roy said, stepping forward. "Thank you all for coming." Loretta surveyed the room with narrowed eyes. "What is this about, Roy? Some kind of peace offering?" "In a way." He gestured to the tables. "Please, find your seats. Dinner will be served shortly." As they moved toward the tables, Callie approached him. "Can we talk?" "Privately. After dinner." Roy's voice was polite but firm. "Everything will make sense soon." Once everyone was seated, servers appeared with the first course of soup Loretta had once dismissed as too common at a restaurant Roy had chosen for Callie's birthday. He watched her recognize it, her lips tightening as they ate. Roy moved to the front of the room. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Family is important, as you've always reminded me." He smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "And tonight is about family, about truth and consequences." He picked up a small remote and clicked it. The projector screen lit up with a photo Roy and Callie on their wedding day, smiling, hopeful. 5 years ago, I married into the Maynard family. I believed I was joining a close-knit group that would become my own. He clicked again. The image changed to a text message between Callie and her mother, dated 2 days after the wedding. "Don't worry, it won't last. He's just a phase." That a murmur ran through the room. Callie's face flushed. "For 5 years, I try to earn your respect." Click. Another message from Loretta to Callie. "Does he have to come to Thanksgiving?" "No one wants him there. Roy continued, his voice steady. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, eventually you'd accept me. Click. A photo from Darla's collection, Callie and Graham at a family gathering. His hand on her lower back, her face turned up to his. Instead, I found this. Click. Text messages between Callie and Graham appeared on the screen, one after another. Roy, stop this. Callie hissed. He ignored her. I discovered other things too. Click. The loan document with Callie's forged signature. Like how Loretta took out a $10,000 loan in her daughter's name, $5,000 of which is currently in a new account under Callie's maiden name. Loretta stood up. This is outrageous. You can't. Sit down. Roy's command was so unexpected that Loretta obeyed automatically. I'm not finished. He clicked again. Social media post from Darla about the dinner party, planning Loretta's big event. 3 weeks to go. Another. Place cards arrived. So elegant. And finally, seating chart done. Sorry, not sorry for some strategic placements. You planned that party for months, Roy said, looking directly at Loretta. You deliberately excluded me. Made me stand there like a fool in front of 30 people. He set down the remote. And then you had the audacity to demand I pay for it. The room was silent. Even the servers had stopped moving. Here's what's going to happen now. Roy picked up a stack of folders from a side table and began distributing them. Inside, you'll find copies of everything I've shown you tonight, plus some things I haven't. Callie, yours includes divorce papers. The terms are non-negotiable. He reached Loretta last. Yours includes a copy of the HOA complaint and the relevant community guidelines you violated. The fine is $15,000. There's also a record of the loan fraud, which I'll be reporting to the bank on Monday unless the full amount is repaid to Callie by then. Loretta's face had gone white. You wouldn't dare. 3 weeks ago, you would have been right. Roy straightened. But something changed that night in your backyard. I realized that trying to earn your respect was a waste of time. Some people only understand power. He looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. I don't want anything from any of you. Not money, not apologies, not explanations. This dinner isn't about reconciliation. It's goodbye. Roy nodded to Avery, who stood by the door. Dinner is over. You can all leave. The bill has been paid. As the stunned group gathered their things, Roy walked to the exit. Callie caught up with him there, tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to me? She demanded. To my family? Roy looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he had loved, who had become someone he barely recognized. I didn't do this to you, Callie. You did it to yourself. He walked past her, out of the private dining room, out of the restaurant, and into the cool evening air. Behind him, he could hear raised voices as the Maynard family turned on each other, the blame game already beginning. Roy got into his car, where Avery waited in the passenger seat. That, she said as he started the engine, was masterful. For the first time in weeks, Roy smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes. It felt good. So what now? He pulled out of the parking lot. Now we see what happens when people face consequences for their actions. 2 weeks passed. Roy's apartment slowly transformed from a temporary shelter to a home. He hung a few pictures, bought plants, arranged his books on newly assembled shelves. The space was modest but is free from Loretta's critical gaze and Callie's indifference. His phone rang less frequently now. The initial barrage of calls and texts from Callie and various family members had dwindled to occasional attempts, which he ignored. His lawyer handled all communication regarding the divorce that on a sunny Tuesday morning, Roy sat at a corner table in Avery's coffee shop, laptop open. When Darla hurried in, phone clutched to her chest like a shield. Roy, thank goodness you're here. I've been looking everywhere for you. He closed his laptop. Hello, Darla. She slid into the chair across from him, glancing around nervously. You have to help. Everything's falling apart. What do you mean? The family. It's chaos. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. After your dinner, which was quite something, by the way, everyone started fighting. Loretta accused Callie of betraying her with Graham. Callie blamed her mother for the loan. Graham's fiancée broke off their engagement publicly on Facebook. And now, she paused dramatically. And now, Roy prompted, keeping his face neutral. Callie's moved out of your house. She's staying with a friend from work. She's not speaking to Loretta. Darla fiddled with her phone case. And Loretta got a letter from the HOA. They're not just fining her. They're putting a lien on her house until she pays. I see. Roy took a sip of his coffee. Why are you telling me this? Darla blinked, seemingly confused by his lack of reaction. Because you need to fix it. You started this, and now everything's a mess. I didn't start anything, Darla. I simply revealed the truth. But they're family, she insisted. Not my family. Roy reopened his laptop. Not anymore. So you're just going to let everything fall apart? Just like that. Roy looked at her steadily. Actions have consequences. Loretta and Callie are experiencing theirs. Darla stared at him, her expression shifting from pleading to indignation. You know, Loretta was right about you. You never fit in. You never understood what family means. You're right. Roy nodded. I didn't understand your definition of family one, where loyalty means covering up lies, where respect is only for those who conform, where love comes with conditions. I'm grateful I never learned that lesson. He turned back to his laptop, a clear dismissal. After a moment, Darla gathered her purse and stood. This isn't over, she said. Roy didn't look up. For me, it is. Later that afternoon, Michael called with an update. Callie's agreed to the terms. She's not contesting anything. That's unexpected. Not really. The evidence you gathered gives us significant leverage. Plus, from what I hear, she's more focused on damage control within her social circle right now. What do you mean? Michael chuckled. Word gets around. The story of your dinner party has spread. Graham's gym is losing clients. Loretta had to step down from her charity board. And Callie, well, let's just say being exposed as a cheater who let her husband be humiliated doesn't play well in polite society. Roy felt a twinge of, not regret, exactly, something milder. I never wanted to destroy them. You didn't. They did that themselves. Michael's voice softened. Look, Roy, I've known you since college. You're one of the good ones. All you did was stop letting them walk over you. After they hung up, Roy stood at his apartment window, looking out at the street below. People passed by, couples holding hands, parents with children, friends laughing together. Normal relationships built on mutual respect and genuine affection that he'd wanted that with Callie. Had believed they had it once, but that was over now. And despite everything, he felt lighter than he had in years. Spring gave way to summer. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed, leaving Roy free to rebuild his life on his own terms. He threw himself into helping Avery expand her business. Together, they worked on plans to open a second coffee shop location across town. Roy's software training background proved useful as they updated systems and created a more efficient operation that on weekends, he explored hiking trails he'd always wanted to try, visiting coastal towns Callie had dismissed as too touristy, attending concerts and art exhibits that interested him. Simple pleasures he'd denied himself to accommodate his ex-wife's preferences and T. Avery's insistence. He joined a book club that met at her shop monthly. It was there, during a heated discussion about a contemporary novel, that he noticed a woman with short dark hair and clever eyes who challenged his interpretation with a wit that made him laugh despite himself. You completely missed the metaphor in Chapter 3, she said, gesturing with her coffee cup. The crow wasn't just a crow. Of course it was a crow, Roy countered, intrigued by her certainty. Not everything is a symbol. In this book, everything is a symbol. She smiled. I'm Tess, by the way. Tess Moreno. The name sparked a distant memory. Tess Moreno, from Western Oregon University? Her eyebrows rose. Yes. Were we in a class together? Contemporary American poetry. Professor Halliday. Roy smiled. You wrote a scathing critique of my analysis of Ginsberg. Tess's eyes widened in recognition. Roy Beckett, the stubborn guy who insisted Ginsberg was overrated. She laughed. You had potential, despite your questionable literary opinions. After the meeting, they continued their debate over coffee, conversation flowing easily from books to music to travel. Tess was a graphic designer, independent and straightforward in a way that felt refreshing after years of navigating Callie's moods and Loretta's manipulations. So what happened to you? She asked eventually. Last I heard, you were teaching high school English and writing poetry on the side. Life happened. Roy shrugged. I got married, switched to corporate training, stopped writing. And now I'm divorced, helping my sister with her business, and he hesitated, thinking about writing again. Tess studied him over her cup. Good. You were never meant for a conventional life, Beckett. I remember that much about you. Their friendship developed naturally over the following week's coffee after book club meetings, occasional texts about books or articles they'd discovered, a spontaneous lunch when they ran into each other downtown. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a genuine connection that Roy hadn't realized how much he'd missed. One evening, as they walked along the river after dinner, Tess asked, "Are you ready to talk about it yet?" "About what?" "Whatever happened that put that look in your eyes sometimes. The one that says you've recently escaped something." Roy was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. "How do you know about that?" "I recognize it." She gazed at the river. "I had the same look after I left my last relationship. Like you're free, but still checking over your shoulder." Slowly, Roy told her the story from the dinner party to the divorce, from the manipulation to his calculated response. He'd never shared the full account with anyone except Avery. When he finished, Tess was silent for a long moment. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," she said finally, but there was respect in her voice rather than judgment. "Do you think I went too far?" "I think," she chose her words carefully, "that people who consistently disrespect others rarely change without significant consequences. You gave them exactly that." She glanced at him. "The better question is, do you think you went too far?" Roy considered this. "No, I don't." Tess nodded. "Then that's your answer." As they continued walking, Roy felt a subtle shift, as if the last weight of his past had finally lifted, leaving him truly free to move forward. The grocery store was crowded for a Wednesday afternoon. Roy navigated his cart through the produce section, checking items off his list. He'd invited Avery and Tess for dinner, nothing fancy, just a casual meal between friends. Or, in Tess's case, perhaps something more. They hadn't put a label on it yet, but the possibilities stretched before them. Unhurried and full of potential, he was selecting avocados when he felt a presence beside him. Looking up, he found himself face to face with Loretta. She had aged in a month since he'd last seen her. New lines creased her forehead, and her carefully maintained blonde hair showed more gray at the roots. Her clothes, once impeccable, seemed slightly rumpled. "Roy," she said, her voice stiff but not hostile. "How are you?" He placed an avocado in his cart. "I'm well, thank you." An awkward silence fell between them. Loretta shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I heard about your sister's coffee shop expansion." "That's nice." Roy nodded. He could have mentioned hearing about her own setbacks, the house she'd had to sell to pay off debts, the social standing she'd lost when the truth about her manipulation spread. But there was no point. "Well," Loretta said finally, "I should get going. My new apartment is smaller. Less storage space for groceries." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Give my best to Avery." She moved to walk past him, then paused. "Callie's seeing someone new, a dentist from her practice." "I wish her well," Roy said simply. Loretta studied his face, perhaps looking for hurt or resentment. Finding none, she seemed almost disappointed. "You know, Roy, despite everything, I always thought you were a decent man. Too soft, but decent. And now I think I underestimated you." She adjusted her purse strap. "Goodbye, Roy." He watched her walk away, her shoulders straight despite everything. He felt no triumph in her diminished circumstances, no joy in her struggle. Only a quiet certainty that justice, in its way, had been served. Roy continued his shopping, the encounter already fading from his mind, replaced by thoughts of the evening ahead, Avery's laughter, Tess's insightful comments, the simple pleasure of sharing food with people who genuinely cared for him. Later that night, as they sat around his small dining table, Avery raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling at Roy and Tess. "And to empty chairs," Roy added, "that make room for the right people." Tess caught his eye, understanding passing between them. She raised her glass to join the toast. "To the right people." As laughter and conversation flowed around him, Roy felt a contentment he hadn't known in years. Not happiness built on others' approval or acceptance, but a peace that came from within, from knowing his own worth and refusing to accept anything less than the respect he deserved. No apologies, no forgiveness, just peace.